Chapter 2.17 Unmasking. Kaven gave Landry a cautious side-eye as he wondered whether he already knew about the wreck of the Lady May. "I found it," he replied after a long pause, suspecting it was better to try and avoid any accusations of killing someone for it. "The Lady May, it crashed," he continued, a hint of sadness tainting the statement. "I found it in the wreckage." Landry's face sunk as he let out a heavy sigh. "Eric," he whispered as he closed his eyes and hung his head in reluctant acceptance. "Eric?" "Captain Eric, actually," Landry responded with a nod, opening his eyes again to look up at Kaven. "I gave him that sword as a gift, a token of my appreciation for all that he had done and continued to do for us." Kaven's eyes narrowed at the statement, unsure of what to make of it. He had never met the captain, but knew that the Lady May was commanded by a Coonkin. Surely the captain wasn't involved in the shadow market, Kaven thought to himself. "What do you mean, us?" he demanded to know. "That is a long story," Landry replied with a heavy breath. "One best told on the way. I'm sure your sister is anxious to see you. May I?" He motioned to the suit hanging on the wall, and Kaven gave a slight nod, backing up to give him room to throw back the duvet and swing his legs out over the edge of the bed. He groaned slightly as he stood up, stretching the tension from his joints as he retrieved the suit off the hook and stepped behind the privacy screen. Listening and watching carefully while Landry changed, Kaven backed his way cautiously over to the chest of drawers that stood against the wall across from the foot of the bed, with a large, ornately framed mirror mounted on the wall above it. Across the top of the dresser was stretched a collection of delicately carved jewelry boxes, crystal bottles of cologne, and some small golden frames containing black and white photographs, one of which caught his eye. He picked it up in his free paw and examined it in the glow of the oil lamp. He saw a slightly younger-looking Landry, standing next to and shaking the paw of whom he could only assume was Captain Eric, given the Coonkin's large, tri-corner hat, leather vest, and black boots, and the pair of pistols hanging from his hips. Behind them in the distance stood the Brindlewood docking tower, similar to the one constructed in Hawthorne, with the hull of the Lady May barely visible in the top of the frame. His mind was racing to find some justification for the relationship, one that didn't result in the captain being on the wrong side of this conflict. Maybe it has nothing to do with pelts, he thought. Maybe he was just a trade partner, giving him a good deal on the cost of transporting goods, he tried assuring himself. Landry was a businessman, after all, and the captain needed good, repeat business. Kaven still had the photograph in his paw when Landry stepped out from behind the privacy screen, the large buckle clanking as he finished cinching close his thick leather belt. He had an olive-green vest with ornately patterned golden stitching over a button-down white shirt. The collar was stiffly pressed and tall around his neck, the points creased and folded neatly underneath his silver beard. He turned his attention to buttoning the cuffs of his sleeves as he stepped closer to Kaven, seeing now that he was holding the photograph. "That was the first time I met Eric." He broke the silence as Kaven set the frame back down in its spot. The docking tower had just been built, and Brindlewood was added to the ship's trade route. I was at the tower's inauguration, along with a few of the other noblemen in the area, and he offered us a tour of the ship. The corners of his mouth curled slightly as Kaven saw the memories come to his eyes. Beautiful piece of machinery she was, a true testament to Coonkin engineering. "Excuse me," he said as he reached past Kaven and opened the lid of a small box, producing a dark green necktie. Standing in front of the mirror, he placed it around the collar of his shirt and expertly tied a fancy bow, the loops and tails of which hung down loosely when he was finished. "It's a shame that she's been lost," he said after a pause, grabbing a brush from a holder near the mirror and using it to straighten the wayward hairs of his beard, and then to smooth the flowing waves of his silver hair. "Do you know how she went down?" he asked after returning the brush to its holder. He sat down in a chair next to the dresser and, bending over, pulled a pair of boots forward from underneath it, putting them on. "I think it was lightning," Kaven said. Landry cocked an eyebrow up as he removed the dark green overcoat from the back of his chair, flinging it over his shoulders and slipping his arms in. He continued adjusting the fit of it, pulling down snugly on the bottom of his vest, waiting for him to continue. It had left Hawthorne already, and I was watching it from the rooftops. It disappeared into the clouds in the distance, he recalled. And then I started seeing lightning, flashes of blue and orange lighting up the clouds. I heard the thunder, and then saw it falling out of the sky. I see, Landry said as he opened the top drawer of the chest, removing a pair of fingerless leather gloves. He pulled the gloves on, adjusting the straps around the wrists before clenching and unclenching his fingers, testing the snugness. That's a shame. He walked over to a side table near the window and grabbed 2 crystal tumblers off a tray. Removing the stopper from a decanter, he poured a shot of brandy into each. Turning, he offered one to Kaven. To the captain. Landry tossed the drink back effortlessly, while Kaven slyly raised his glass to barely touch his lips, setting it back down on the dresser. Landry didn't seem to notice, or at least didn't care, as he walked over to the nightstand to retrieve the oil lamp. He stepped back around the foot of the bed toward the door, stepping past Kaven as he did. "Shall we?" he motioned welcomingly with his hand as he held the door open for him. Kaven stepped out into the darkened hallway, sword still in hand, cautious always of keeping Landry in front of him. Landry quietly closed the door of the room and led Kaven down the hall to a flight of stairs. They descended into the main foyer of the mansion, where Landry led him around the corner, through a fancy dining hall, and into the kitchen. "Where are we—" "Shh," Landry interrupted him, holding his finger to his lips. "Quiet," he whispered. He opened a pantry door and stepped inside, motioning for Kaven to follow him. The pantry was small, but large enough for them to both fit without it being too cramped. Landry then reached under a shelf and pulled on a latch. With a dull thunk, the back wall swung away from them, revealing a stone staircase that spiraled downward. "Come on," Landry whispered, closing the wall behind them as they began descending the steps. "Now that no one can hear us," Landry said, his voice echoing slightly through the stone stairwell as they continued downward, "I'll let you in on a little secret. I was 9 when my father decided it was time to introduce me to the activities of the shadow market by making me participate in my first hunt. Needless to say," he paused, turning around to look Kaven directly in the eyes, "I was appalled, disgusted." He turned and continued descending. "After that, I wanted nothing to do with it, or him. I tried my best to avoid everything related to the shadow market, making up this excuse or that to get out of attending other events. But as I grew older, social expectations began to take their toll, and it became clear to me that if I did not do my part to try and fit in with the other noblemen, then I would be cut out of the will and lose my inheritance of the estate. When my father finally died," he continued, "I turned my attention towards trying to use my wealth as a means of helping the Coonkin." They reached the bottom of the staircase, which opened into a long tunnel. "My family's estate was built close to the coal mines that were dug beneath and through the mesas that separate Brindlewood from the north. Eric was able to put me in contact with a member of the Academy's engineering corps, and they were able to help with constructing that passage." "So, what then?" Kaven interjected. "You pay mercenaries to kidnap Sparkless and then smuggle them out?" "Yes, exactly," Landry confirmed with a nod. "I do occasionally need to attend the other noblemen's hunts, or accept their dinner offers," he said with a shudder. "I have to play the part, to keep up appearances." "What about your guards?" Kaven asked as they continued down the long tunnel, following it as it bent and curved around. "Don't they get suspicious?" "Well," Landry started, "that's where I get a little help from the Frostpelt. The north may be a rough place for the Coonkin, but human hunting parties that travel through the mesas looking for sport are not the only dangers. Chief Chillpaw understands that for every living Coonkin I help escape to the north, I need a body to bring back." Kaven quickly grabbed Landry's shoulder and stopped walking, forcing him to turn around and face him. "They're usually elderly," Landry quickly reassured him, holding up his gloved hand in front of him. "Ones that died of natural causes, or were attacked by other wild animals and were too injured to survive." "But you would still desecrate them?" Kaven asked, referring to the practice of skinning them for their pelts and harvesting them for their meat. For the greater good? So that I can continue helping more Sparkless? Yes, Landry solemnly confirmed. I don't host hunts or dinners to show off to the other elites, though. The meat helps to feed my guards, and the pelts help to clothe them. I respectfully utilize what Spirit provides, and I help the living along the way, he finished, firmly pointing a finger at Kaven's face. He turned and continued walking down the tunnel, disappearing around another bend before Kaven moved to quickly catch up. Rounding the corner, he saw a steel minecart on a piece of track, which disappeared down another tunnel to the left. Like most minecarts, a long handbrake protruded upward from the front wheel. Unlike most minecarts, though, this one had a control panel mounted to the front end, with a collection of knobs, buttons, and dials. Hydraulic pistons were mounted to the wheels, much like a miniature locomotive. "What's this?" Kaven asked tentatively, as Landry firmly affixed the oil lamp into a holster at the front of the cart, specifically designed to hold it and amplify the light in a beam down the tunnel. "This is how we're getting you to Chillhaven," he replied as he unlatched and opened the door that had been cut into the side of the cart, revealing 2 seats inside of it. "All aboard,"